seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Commanding Officer, Naval Aviation Schools Command, welcome to the graduation parade of Officer Candidate School Class, Honor Class 1302, consisting of 59 candidates. Located in front of the reviewing stand is the regimental staff for today's parade, comprised of the senior ranking candidate officers of the graduating class. Additionally, these candidate officers have earned distinguished graduate status by graduating in the top 10% of their class. They are Commander of Troops, Regimental Commander, Lieutenant Captain Heverin. Regimental Sub-Commander, Lieutenant Commander Servallo. Battalion 1 Commander, Lieutenant Commander Hanser. Battalion 2 Commander, Lieutenant Commander Eberhardt. Indoctrination Commander, Lieutenant Commander Cooper. And GTX Commander, Lieutenant Commander Haney. The first platoon on the left, comprised of the graduating class, Honor Class 1302, and platoon staff consisting of Platoon Commander, Lieutenant Helbig, Platoon Sub-Commander, Lieutenant Grishmacher, and Platoon Guide, Lieutenant Junior Grade Bruner. As represented by the streamers on their guideline, Honor Class 1302 has distinguished itself by achieving standards of excellence in drill, physical fitness, military training test, academics, and inspection. The second platoon, a rifle platoon, is comprised of candidates in their 9th week of training. This platoon staff consists of Platoon Commander, Lieutenant Hong, Platoon Sub-Commander, Lieutenant Junior Grade Goda, and Platoon Guide, Lieutenant Junior Grade Dennison. The third platoon, also a rifle platoon, is comprised of candidates in their 8th week of training. The platoon staff consists of Platoon Commander, Lieutenant Gouveia, Platoon Sub-Commander, Lieutenant Junior Grade Cook, and Platoon Guide, Lieutenant Junior Grade Peveril. The fourth platoon is comprised of candidates in their 6th week of training. The platoon staff consists of Platoon Commander, Lieutenant Story, Platoon Sub-Commander, Lieutenant Junior Grade Howland, and Platoon Guide, Lieutenant Junior Grade Kaufman. The band commander is Lieutenant Ensign Gothrow. The band is composed of officer candidates from all classes. Guests are encouraged to take photographs at any time during the ceremony, except during the playing of the national anthem. At this time, guests are invited to proceed out onto the parade field to take photographs. Naval Aviation Schools Command, arriving.
Morning, Skipper.
Captain, United States Navy, arriving.
How you doing, sir?
Carry, sword. Stand, come out. March. Stand, freeze it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Stand! Present! So, sir, ready to sport.
Exercise candidates.
Aye, aye, sir. Stand! Carry! So, stand! About! Mark! Exercise the candidate! Thunder! Inspection! Regiment attention! Report, sir! Aye, sir. Report.
Platoon, all present, or accounted for, sir.
Very well. Platoon, all present, or accounted for, sir. Very well. Platoon, all present, or accounted for, sir. Very well. Platoon, all present, or accounted for, sir. Very well. All present, or accounted for, sir. Very well. How is yours, sir? Aye, aye, sir. Attention to orders! Headquarters! Naval Aviation Tools Command! Naval Air Station! Pensacola, Florida! The honors of the day are to graduate and commission underclass 1302. All other pledges
The reviewing officer for today's parade is Captain Gary Evans. Captain Evans graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1972. He received his initial pilot training here in Pensacola, Florida, and was subsequently designated a naval aviator in 1975. His tours of duty have included flying the A-6 aircraft for Squadron VA-85, serving as a flight instructor for VT-26, Assistant Strike Operations Officer on board USS America, Department Head tours on board USS Kennedy and USS Saratoga, Commanding Officer of the Medium Attack Tactical Employment School, Executive Officer of Fleet Composite Squadron 10, Assistant Air Operations Officer on board USS America, Assistant Chief of Staff, Commander, Naval Strike and Support Forces, Southern Europe, and Director, CTF-88 Seaclient Fleet. The graduates assembled in front of the reviewing stand are to be honored for their outstanding achievements while undergoing training here at Naval Aviation Schools Command. Lieutenant Commander Heverin from Honolulu, Hawaii. Captain Heverin is a distinguished graduate and served as a regimental commander. Lieutenant Commander Sorvallo from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Lieutenant Commander Sorvallo is a distinguished graduate and served as a regimental subcommander. Lieutenant Commander Hanser from Billings, Montana. Lieutenant Commander Hanser is a distinguished graduate and served as a Battalion 1 commander. Lieutenant Commander Eberhardt from West Hempstead, New York. Lieutenant Commander Eberhardt is a distinguished graduate and served as Battalion 2 commander. Lieutenant Commander Cooper from Fredericktown, Missouri. Lieutenant Commander Cooper is a distinguished graduate and served as Indoctrination commander. And Lieutenant Commander Haney from Auburn, Washington. Lieutenant Commander Haney is a distinguished graduate and served as a GTX commander. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please rise for the passing of the colors?
Right! Right!
Military guests, please rise for anchors away in the Marine Center. Captain, United States Navy, departing. Naval Aviation School Command, departing. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's parade. Families and guests of the graduating class are invited to battalion.
Please welcome a carrier aviator, warfighter, a superb naval officer, and this morning I know an extremely proud father of Ensign Evans, Captain Gary Evans.
What an awesome day we've had so far. And like the commercial that one of our sister services used to use. Many of us who got up at 4:30 this morning can say we did it all before breakfast. Captain Weideman, distinguished guests, family and friends, Officer Kennegate School staff, and Honor Class 1302. It is a distinct honor and a great pleasure for me to be standing before you today. As Captain Weideman noted, my daughter is among this class, in fact, the only female among this class. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to take this opportunity to embarrass her a little. Ensign Evans, front and center, please. If you hadn't heard, her call sign is Smurfette. I don't know how her mother found that, but she did. As I've reflected on what I might say to such an aspiring group of young officers on this auspicious occasion, two things came to mind. Number one, and certainly foremost, was to keep it short. These young candidate officers have just completed 13 weeks of extremely challenging training, sometimes referred to as hell, and they aren't really listening to me anyway, because their minds are on things like oaths, silver dollars, and celebrating, not necessarily in that order. So I'll try to keep my remarks to 45 minutes. Just kidding, just kidding. The second thing that came to mind, and the topic of my short remarks, was leadership goals. Leadership is a word that is often used in the military these days. So much so sometimes it's considered trite. But my emphasis will be on the second part of that, the goals as a leader. Believe it or not, I can actually remember almost 30 years ago when, like you today, I sat in a stadium in Annapolis, Maryland, waiting for some guy to shut up so I could throw my hat in the air and become an ensign. By the way, I don't remember what he said or even who spoke, but I don't think it was the president. I also wasn't thinking much about my leadership goals at that time, but the Navy was way ahead of me. They already had a tried and true process in place, and all I had to do was take advantage of the opportunities afforded to me, and you can do the same thing. So what are leadership goals, and how is the Navy going to help you reach them? First, let me relate a little story my son sent to me in an email, slightly adapted. A man who was traveling in a hot air balloon realized he was lost. He reduced altitude and spotted another man on the ground. He sent it a bit more and shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend I would meet him an hour ago, and I don't know where I am." You're in a hot air balloon, approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude, replied the man below. You must be a chief petty officer or drill instructor, replied the balloonist. You're right, replied the man on the ground. How did you know? Well, answered the balloonist, everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of it. The fact is, I am still lost, and frankly, you have not been much help to me. Well, you must be an ensign, said the man below. I am, replied the balloonist, but how did you know? Well, said the man on the ground, You don't know where you are or where you're going. You have risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise which you cannot keep, and you expect people beneath you to solve your problems. The fact is, you are exactly where you were, the same position you were in before we met, but now somehow it's my fault. It's easy to stereotype and poke fun at each other, but there is usually some subtle truth in humor. With respect to leadership goals, many of you soon-to-be ensigns probably don't know where you are or where you're going. Although with this class, that may not be true because you have a number of folks wearing medals here today who obviously know a good deal about leadership already. You obviously do have goals. Some of you would argue that this generation probably has more goals than the boomer generation that Captain Weideman and I are from. But I think your goals are more professionally oriented. You want to be the best pilot, the best surface warfare officer, the best intelligence officer. All extremely important goals, and likely the reason you have made it as far as you have already, when others have failed. But I must say that the naval profession and the military in general, for that matter, is all about leadership. Why is that, you might ask? The answer has been repeated many times by some who meant it and by some who were only paying lip service to it. But it continues to be true and will be for many years to come. People are our most precious asset. You may not know it now, but you wouldn't be here today if it weren't for some very effective leadership by some remarkably dedicated drill instructors and chief petty officers. Those professionals, like Gunnery Sergeant Merriman and Senior Chief Lucas, didn't just walk off the street and assume those positions of leadership. They were handpicked after years of preparation in the fleet. And I'll bet most of them didn't enlist with the leadership goal of doing the impossible task of taking civilians and turning them into naval officers in 13 weeks. So how did they get where they are? And how will you discover and achieve your leadership goals? As I indicated before, the Navy and the Marine Corps have a tried and true process that will get you there if you take advantage of it, as your chief petty officers and DIs have. There are really two parts to this process. One is often termed responsibility and accountability. Others might call it trial by fire. But I thought the more apt description is leadership immersion. From the beginning of your career, you will be given far more responsibility than the vast majority of your civilian counterparts. Many of you in this class who have previous service already know that. I still marvel at the fact that at the tender age of 24, I was given a multi-million-dollar aircraft and told to go land it on an aircraft carrier where literally hundreds of lives were at stake if I made a mistake. But even more important and challenging, I was assigned a division of people to lead. This is the trial by fire I spoke of. And it will happen to all of you. Now, admittedly, as an ensign or a Lieutenant JG, I was doing very little leading. But that brings me to the second part, the second aspect of this tried and true process, which also goes by several names, but is probably best characterized by the word mentoring. As this wet behind the ears ensign, I was hardly ready to lead 20 or 30 sailors, many of whom were 8, 10, or 15 years my senior, and a great deal more experienced. But I had a lot of help from my first-class petty officers, my chief, and my department head. I quickly learned that success was not really measured by some readiness numbers or even by how well I flew my airplane or drove the ship. It was measured by the success of my people and how well they felt about their work. I didn't learn that by watching a training film or listening to a commissioning ceremony speech. I learned that by watching and listening to the leaders and the mentors around me over these past 30 years, and there have been many. So what does this accountability, responsibility, and mentoring process have to do with leadership goals? As I said, when I was commissioned, I didn't really have any particular leadership goals. But through this tried and true process, I quickly realized that while my wings of gold were something to be proud of, the real job of fighting and winning wars was done by successful organizations that were effectively led and performed as a team. A football team is a great example. You could have the top 22 superstars that money could buy on the squad, but if they aren't coached well and play together as a team, they'll lose every game. As an officer in the U.S. Navy, our country is counting on you to not just perform your professional specialty well, but to lead the people well under you. I can't set your leadership goals for you, but I can tell you that they are as important, if not more important, than your professional goals. I wear a command pin, and that was certainly an extremely rewarding tour. But I can unequivocally say that every tour I've had has been a very rewarding tour from a leadership standpoint. There is tremendous satisfaction in knowing that you are part of an organization, a team, that takes care of each other and gets the job done right. The fact that within 1 month of the September 11th terrorist attack, U.S. Navy aircraft were bringing combat to our enemies in their sanctuary on the other side of the world is much more a triumph of leadership than a feat of technology or the result of individual efforts. Like me, 5 or 10 years from now, I doubt you will remember who spoke or what was said today, but you will remember the friends you made here and the leadership you received from your drill instructors and chief petty officers. Your challenge then is to be like them. Set some leadership goals and be on the tip of the spear. God bless. Thank you.
Truer words were never said. Wonderful, wonderful job. On behalf of Honor Class 1-2 and our entire staff here, I'd like to present you with a traditional Naval Aviation Schools Command plaque. I know you've got an office still on active duty for a few more months. We hope you can find a place for this. Certainly. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Honor Class 1302 and guests, please rise for the oath of office. Honor Class 1302, raise your right hands and repeat after me. I state your full name. Having been appointed an ensign in the United States Navy, do accept such an appointment and do solemnly swear that I will support and defend Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. Guests may be seated. Those persons desiring to take photographs may come forward and do so at this time. 2. The graduates will now come forward to receive their certificates. John Abrams. Mr. Abrams will be assigned to Supply Corps Officer School, Athens, Georgia, where he will commence training as a Supply Corps officer. Richfield Aguilana. Mr. Aguilana will be assigned to Aerospace Maintenance Duty Officer School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as an Aerospace Maintenance Duty Officer. Douglas Alley. Mr. Alley will be assigned to Explosive Ordnance Disposal Group 2, Detachment Roosevelt's Rose, Puerto Rico, where he will commence training as an Explosive Ordnance Disposal Officer. Julian Bradley. Mr. Bradley will be assigned to Supply Corps Officer School, Athens, Georgia, where he will commence training as a Supply Corps officer. Jeffrey Bruner. Mr. Bruner will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Flight Officer. Daniel Card. Mr. Card will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Robert Ciravolo. Mr. Ciravolo will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Kendall Chapman. Mr. Chapman will be assigned to Civil Engineering Corps Officer School, Fort Runnymede, California, where he will commence training as a Civil Engineering Corps Officer. Jason Constant. Mr. Constant will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Danny Cook. Mr. Cook will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Larry Cooper. Mr. Cooper will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Matthew Courtney. Mr. Courtney will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Flight Officer. Charles Dennison. Mr. Dennison will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Marcos Diaz. Mr. Diaz will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Peter Eberhardt. Mr. Eberhardt will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Kimberly Evans. Mr. Evans will be assigned to Navy and Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where she will commence training as a Naval Intelligence Officer. Theodore Goda. Mr. Goda will be assigned to Naval Nuclear Power School, Charleston, South Carolina, where he will commence training as a Nuclear Submarine Warfare Officer. Patrick Godfrey. Mr. Godfrey will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Flight Officer. Andrew Gothrow. Mr. Gothrow will be assigned to Navy and Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a Naval Intelligence Officer. Paul Gouveia. Mr. Gouveia will be assigned to Naval Nuclear Power School, Charleston, South Carolina, where he will commence training as a Nuclear Submarine Warfare Officer. Bradley Gretzmacher. Mr. Gretzmacher will be assigned to Supply Corps Officer School, Athens, Georgia, where he will commence training as a Supply Corps Officer. Jesse Hallen. Mr. Hallen will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Flight Officer. Brian Haney. Mr. Haney will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Jason Hanser. Mr. Hanser will be assigned to Naval Cryptologic Basic Officer Course, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Cryptologic Officer. Gary Harding. Mr. Harding will be assigned to Surface Warfare Officer School, Newport, Rhode Island, where he will commence training as a Surface Warfare Officer. John Heverin. Mr. Heverin will be assigned to Navy and Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a Naval Intelligence Officer. Brenton Helbig. Mr. Helbig will be assigned to Navy and Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a Naval Intelligence Officer. Seth Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Brian Hong. Mr. Hong will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Graham Hunt. Mr. Hunt will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Flight Officer. Ryan Kaufman. Mr. Kaufman will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Quentin Keel. Mr. Keel will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Michael Krawcheck. Mr. Krawcheck will be assigned to Civil Engineer Corps Officer School, Port Hueneme, California, where he will commence training as a Civil Engineer Corps Officer. Devin Levery. Mr. Levery will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Flight Officer. Julius Lim. Mr. Lim will be assigned to Surface Warfare Officer School, Newport, Rhode Island, where he will commence training as a Surface Warfare Officer. Christopher Lonsberry. Mr. Lonsberry will be assigned to Supply Corps Officer School, Athens, Georgia, where he will commence training as a Supply Corps Officer. Corey Lynch. Mr. Lynch will be assigned to Supply Corps Officer School, Athens, Georgia, where he will commence training as a Supply Corps Officer. David Benjamin Matsumoto. Mr. Matsumoto will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Aviator. Jason McCord. Mr. McCord will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a Naval Flight Officer. Sean McEwen. Mr. McEwen will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval aviator. Alexander Moyer. Mr. Moyer will be assigned to Navy Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a naval intelligence officer. Christopher Morrissey. Mr. Morrissey will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval aviator. Sung Nguyen. Mr. Nguyen will be assigned to Navy Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a naval intelligence officer. David Nisler. Mr. Nisler will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval flight officer. Sean Olenek. Mr. Olenek will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval flight officer. Brian Padwarney. Mr. Padwarney will be assigned to Naval Nuclear Power School, Charleston, South Carolina, where he will commence training as a nuclear submarine warfare officer. Gabriel Perea. Mr. Perea will be assigned to Civil Engineer Corps Officer School, Port Hueneme, California, where he will commence training as a Civil Engineer Corps Officer. Joe Perry. Mr. Perry will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval aviator. Dustin Pepperell. Mr. Pepperell will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval aviator. Dwayne Reinhardt. Mr. Reinhardt will be assigned to Navy and Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a naval intelligence officer. Jesse Sherry. Mr. Sherry will be assigned to Navy and Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a naval intelligence officer. Brandon Simpson. Mr. Simpson will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval flight officer. Matthew Smith. Mr. Smith will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval aviator. Michael Stephen. Mr. Stephen will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval flight officer. Eric Story. Mr. Story will be assigned to Navy and Marine Corps Officer Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, where he will commence training as a naval intelligence officer. Matthew Tigert. Mr. Tigert will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval flight officer. George Sukatos. Mr. Sukatos will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval flight officer. Donald Wallace. Mr. Wallace will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval aviator. James Williamson. Mr. Williamson will be assigned to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination School, Pensacola, Florida, where he will commence training as a naval aviator.
alley, sir.
Morning, sir.
Step one step closer, sir. Step, sir. Step closer. Do it again. Thanks, sir. morning, sir. Two. Take care. Good luck to you. And salute. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Two. And salute. Two. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Ready, two. going up. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, ma'am. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. Congratulations, sir. Thanks, sir. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good 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 morning, sir. Ready, two. two. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Morning, sir. Two. Congratulations. Good luck to you. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Morning, sir. Ready, two. Congratulations. Good luck. Take care out there. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Take a step closer, sir. Thank you, sir. Ready, two. Thank you very much. Congratulations, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Look. And salute. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. Congratulations. salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. Congratulations. And salute. Take a step closer, sir. Take a step closer, sir. Come on. Thank you, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. Congratulations, sir. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. Congratulations. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two. And salute. Two. And salute. Good morning, sir. Ready, two.
The performers are all from the Officer Candidate School, Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida. Flags are as old as civilization, yet they still retain their ancient power. Throughout history, men and women have realized that they could express their feelings national flag, and by understanding something of its meaning and history.